Most Americans think wealth begins with a lucky break, a high salary, or a perfect investment, but stay with me here, because the real story is much stranger. In every city, from Phoenix to Pittsburgh, there are people earning the same paycheck as you who somehow end each year with more savings, less stress, and a growing sense of control. You've probably noticed this too. Two coworkers make similar money, yet one is always overwhelmed while the other quietly builds a future. And here's the part that surprises most Americans. It's not discipline, it's not intelligence, it's not even hustle. It is a set of hidden rules wealthy thinkers follow long before the money shows up. Think about this for a second. The average American household now faces over $748.00 a month in car payments, groceries that cost 25% more than in 2019, and rent rising faster than wages in almost every major state. Yet some people still manage to grow their net worth in the middle of all that pressure. How? The punchline is simple. Wealth has far less to do with income and far more to do with behavior. And here's what most people completely overlook. These rules are learnable, repeatable, and shockingly practical once you see them clearly. But everything you've heard so far is only the surface, because the deeper shift, the one that truly separates wealthy Americans from everyone else, begins in the next section. If you want to understand the 7 hidden rules wealthy people follow, you first need to understand the financial environment Americans are living in right now. Because the truth is, the average person is not struggling due to a lack of effort. They are struggling because the system around them creates constant financial friction. Think about your own life for a moment. You wake up, check your bank account, and before you even pour your first cup of coffee, half your paycheck is already spoken for. Rent in states like Texas, Florida, and Arizona has jumped more than 30% in just a few years. Daycare in many cities now costs more than a small mortgage. And according to recent data, 61% of Americans live paycheck to paycheck, even those earning 6 figures. That statistic alone should make you pause. But here's where the story flips. In this exact same environment, a small group of people quietly build wealth year after year without lottery luck, without insider information, without Silicon Valley salaries. They navigate the same storms everyone else faces, yet somehow they stay afloat while others feel like they're drowning. You've probably felt that tension yourself. That moment at the grocery store when you notice the total is higher than last week, or when you look at Zillow and wonder how anyone your age is affording a home, or when the mechanic tells you the repair will cost more than your monthly rent. These little financial shocks add up, creating a constant hum of anxiety in the background of everyday life. Stay with me here because this part matters. Most people try to solve these problems by earning more. Get a raise, work overtime, pick up a side gig, make more money, and everything will get better. But for millions of Americans, even as wages rise, the pressure doesn't disappear. Why? Because income doesn't automatically create stability. Behavior does. And behavior is shaped by the rules we follow, whether we know it or not. Here's a punchline most Americans completely overlook. Wealth is not built in the moments when everything goes right. Wealth is built in the moments when everything feels tight. The tiny choices you make between paychecks matter more than the big goals you journal about in January. And here's another twist. The financial environment you live in trains you to think short-term. Prices rising fast, you focus on survival. Popular media showing lifestyles you can't afford, you feel behind. Employers asking for more output than ever, you feel exhausted. And exhausted people don't make strategic decisions. They make reactive ones. Pause for a moment and imagine this. Instead of waking up every day feeling financially cornered, you start playing a different game, a slower, calmer, more intentional game, one where you're not trying to predict the stock market, time the economy, or chase the next big thing, one where you follow a set of rules that wealthy people have used for decades to stay ahead even when the economy turns against them. These rules don't require brilliance, they require awareness. And once you start noticing how money flows through your life, you begin to see opportunities you were blind to before. The truth is, most Americans don't fail financially because they're irresponsible. They fail because they were never taught the operating system wealthy people use behind the scenes. The operating system that helps them handle inflation, avoid lifestyle creep, manage debt without drowning, and make decisions that compound over time. The operating system that turns chaos into clarity. And this is where the deeper understanding begins. Because the 7 hidden rules you're about to learn are not theories, they are patterns. Patterns repeated across decades of economic cycles, across different states, different income levels, and different life experiences. Patterns wealthy Americans follow almost automatically. But the real breakthrough, the part that changes everything, comes in the next section. To understand the 7 hidden rules wealthy people follow, you need one core insight that almost nobody in America ever hears clearly. Wealth is created by patterns, not luck, not talent, not guessing the right stock at the right moment. Patterns, repeatable behaviors that shape how your money behaves over 10 years, 20 years, and eventually your entire lifetime. And here is the part that surprises most viewers. These patterns do not depend on income. They depend on how you think when money shows up and how you think when money disappears. Stay with me here, because once you see the larger pattern, every financial decision starts to make more sense. Think about the way most Americans experience money. It comes in through a paycheck, sits in a bank account for a few days, then flows out through rent, food, transportation, medical bills, and whatever unexpected expense pops up that month. It is a cycle that repeats endlessly, leaving little room for growth or breathing space. You have felt this too. One surprise bill can throw off an entire month. A car repair can break your momentum. A medical visit can wipe out the progress you fought so hard to build. The average American now carries over $60,000 in total debt across mortgages, cars, credit cards, and student loans. That pressure shapes behavior more than anyone wants to admit. But wealthy thinkers operate with a different internal script. Instead of reacting to every financial event, they step back and study the structure behind it. They look for the pattern beneath the chaos. They ask questions most people never pause long enough to consider. Why did this expense sting so much? Why did this month feel tighter than usual? Why do I keep ending the year in the same place even though I worked harder? These questions are not complaints. They are diagnostics. Wealthy people treat money the way a doctor treats a medical case. They investigate, measure, observe, and learn until they understand the system well enough to improve it. That mindset shift is one of the greatest dividing lines in American life. Pause for a moment and imagine you are looking at your own financial life from above, the way a pilot looks at a city from the sky. At ground level, everything feels loud, chaotic, and unpredictable. Prices rise, bills arrive, emergencies happen, but from above, you can see the routes, the traffic patterns, the cycles, the bottlenecks. You begin to understand that wealth is not the result of a perfect year. It is the result of improving the pattern beneath the year. Now here comes the punchline that most Americans never notice. Every wealthy household, regardless of income, follows a simple sequence. First, they reduce chaos. Then they create structure. Then they guide their money into places where it can grow without constant emotional pressure. It may sound obvious, but once you truly understand this sequence, you will realize you have been trying to jump directly to the growth stage without stabilizing the foundation. That is why the same obstacles keep showing up again and again. When you skip the sequence, progress collapses under its own weight. And here's the second punchline. Stability is not created by big moves. It is created by removing small leaks that quietly drain your progress. Americans often search for a dramatic solution, a higher income, a perfect investment, a winning moment that changes the entire story. But wealthy thinkers focus on the leaks before the wins. They know you cannot fill a bucket that has holes in the bottom. Eliminating leaks is not glamorous, but it is transformative. A small leak removed today becomes an enormous advantage 20 years from now. Consider a simple example. When groceries rise by $10 or $20 per trip, most households do not adjust their broader system. They absorb the hit emotionally and move on. But $20 per week becomes more than $1,000 in a year, which becomes several thousand in a few years. The pattern compounds. Meanwhile, a wealthy thinker will pause long enough to ask why the increase feels so painful and what structural habits can be shifted to absorb it. The answer might be adjusting the frequency of certain purchases, automating a savings transfer, or preparing meals differently. The specifics matter less than the mindset. They refuse to let small leaks become permanent ones. Here is where the story flips again. Once you stabilize the bottom of the bucket, you now have the mental space to study long-term patterns. Wealthy thinkers are not obsessed with market predictions. They are obsessed with understanding how human behavior repeats across generations. They know the average American investor underperforms the market not because the market is unfair, but because emotions push people to buy at the wrong time and sell at the wrong time. They observe this pattern, and they build systems that shield them from emotional decisions. Systems create consistency, consistency creates compounding, and compounding is the quiet engine behind every wealth story in this country. Think about the concept of compounding in your own life. Most people understand the idea of interest building on interest, but very few understand the emotional discipline required to let that process play out. The first few years feel slow, painfully slow. You contribute money, but the growth seems tiny. Then, almost suddenly, in year 10, year 15, year 20, the numbers begin to rise faster. The process accelerates. It feels like magic, but it is really patience meeting mathematics. The wealthy do not obsess over speed, they obsess over duration. That single insight separates them from nearly everyone else. Another pattern wealthy people notice is that complexity destroys clarity. Most Americans are overwhelmed because their financial lives are too complicated. Too many accounts, too many goals, too many subscriptions, too many decisions. Wealthy thinkers simplify the system. Fewer accounts, clearer priorities, automatic transfers, a smaller number of things to pay attention to. This simplicity gives them better control and reduces emotional noise. Imagine trying to play a strategy game where the board is constantly shaking. That is what most households feel every month. Wealthy thinkers steady the board before making any moves. And here is a truth that surprises almost everyone. Wealth rarely comes from dramatic gains. It comes from avoiding big mistakes. Americans lose more wealth from fees, taxes, panic selling, lifestyle creep, and poor timing than they ever miss out on from not finding the next giant stock. Wealthy thinkers avoid the mistakes that sink the average household. They protect the downside so the upside can grow. All of this brings us to the core insight in its simplest form. Wealth is not the result of one powerful decision. It is the result of hundreds of small, repeatable behaviors that shape the pattern of your financial life. If you improve the pattern, you improve the outcome. And the moment this insight truly clicks, the next section will hit even harder because you are about to see how these patterns play out in real American lives every single day. Let me tell you a story that feels familiar to millions of Americans. It takes place in a small town outside Denver where a couple named Mark and Elise were doing everything they believed responsible adults were supposed to do. They worked stable jobs, paid their bills on time, contributed to their retirement accounts when they could, and avoided unnecessary debt. Yet somehow, month after month, they still felt like they were treading water. You have probably felt this too. That moment when you look at your finances and think, I am working hard, but I am not moving forward. Mark worked in logistics, earning close to $65,000 a year. Elise worked as a preschool teacher, making about $40,000. On paper, they looked fine, But life in America rarely matches the numbers on paper. Their two kids were in childcare, and childcare alone cost more than their monthly rent. Groceries jumped nearly $200 since the previous year. Their older car needed repairs that cost almost a full paycheck. They paid when they tried to save, something always came up. It felt like every step forward was followed by two steps back. Here is where the story flips. One evening, after another stressful budget conversation, they sat down at their kitchen table and looked at their finances differently. Not emotionally, not with panic, just with curiosity. They noticed a pattern. They were not failing because they were irresponsible. They were failing because their money had no structure. Everything came in, everything went out, and nothing stayed long enough to grow. They were reacting to life instead of directing it. That single realization became the turning point. Think about this for a moment. Most households do not track their money closely because the process feels overwhelming. But the moment you look clearly, the story begins to change. That night, Mark and Elise discovered they were spending almost $300 each month on convenience purchases they barely remembered. Doorstep meals after long work days, app subscriptions that auto-renewed, clothes for the kids bought in moments of stress rather than intention. None of these choices were wrong, but they were leaks in the system. Stay with me here, because what happened next is where real transformation begins. Instead of trying to overhaul their entire financial life in 1 week, they chose one change, only one. They decided that on the day Mark got paid, 10% of his paycheck would automatically move into a separate savings account. No decisions required, no discipline needed in the moment, just a rule written into the structure of their lives. The first month felt strange. Their main account looked tighter, they had to be more aware of small expenses, but surprisingly, they did not feel deprived. They felt clearer. The automatic savings made them consider their choices more intentionally. That clarity reduced stress rather than increased it. They saw the pattern start to shift. Then 5 months passed. Their savings account had more money than they had ever managed to keep untouched. It was not a fortune, but it was momentum. And momentum is powerful. Meanwhile, something else changed too. Their arguments about money decreased because they were no longer reacting to emergencies. They were anticipating them. Here's the punchline that most Americans overlook. A single structural change ripples through an entire life. With savings in place, they could handle unexpected bills without panic. With fewer leaks, they felt more control. With more control, they made better long-term decisions. The pattern created stability. But the story does not end here. 1 year later, the company Mark worked for announced layoffs. A recession had slowed operations, and teams were being reduced. This moment could have shattered them. Losing a job when you are living paycheck to paycheck is a crisis that overwhelms millions every year. According to recent data, almost 40% of Americans cannot cover a $400 emergency. That reality creates fear that shapes decisions. Yet when the news hit, Mark did not panic. He felt concern, of course, but not the desperation that many experience. For the first time in their lives, they had a cushion. They had structure. They had months of living expenses saved. Instead of collapsing under pressure, they strategized. That stability changed everything. Pause for a moment and imagine this. The same financial event that pushes one household into chaos can push another into clarity. Why? Because the pattern was different long before the event happened. Wealth is not built in good times. It is preserved in hard times. And their story is proof of that. During the months that followed, Mark applied for jobs, updated skills, talked to recruiters, and eventually found a new position with slightly better pay. Because they were not rushed, they could choose wisely instead of grabbing the first thing available. They stepped forward, not backward. Meanwhile, something deeper shifted in their mindset. Before the turning point, they believed they were failing because life was unfair. After the turning point, they saw their finances as a system they could improve. That psychological shift gave them confidence. Confidence created consistency, and consistency created progress. Over the next 2 years, they implemented more rules, small, simple rules that shaped their decisions. They capped discretionary spending at a fixed number. They reviewed subscriptions twice a year. They let their savings grow before upgrading anything in their lifestyle. They did not try to mimic wealthy families. They tried to mimic wealthy behaviors. By year 3, they had paid off a remaining credit card, built an emergency fund, and started investing automatically. Nothing dramatic, no impossible goals, just structure. And that structure created a sense of calm that touched every area of their lives. Even their relationship felt lighter. Money no longer controlled them. They controlled the pattern that money followed. And here comes the final punchline of this story. When people saw the improvements in their lives, many assumed it came from a higher income or some good luck. But the truth is much simpler. Their lives changed because they learned one of the 7 hidden rules. Fix the pattern, not the moment. But the deeper lessons, the ones that can shift your entire financial future, are coming next. When you look closely at the lives of people who build wealth in America, you start to notice a set of principles working quietly in the background. These principles are not secrets. They are not magic formulas. They are simple patterns that guide behavior when money feels tight and when money feels abundant. Stay with me here, because each principle creates a shift that most people never experience long enough to benefit from. And once you understand these lessons, the 7 hidden rules begin to make sense on a deeper level. The first principle is this: money follows direction, not intention. Most Americans intend to save. They intend to invest. They intend to get serious about their future. But intention does nothing without a system that directs money automatically. Think about it like water in a garden. If you hope the plants get enough water, they will wilt. If you create irrigation, the plants thrive. Wealthy people create irrigation for their money. They build automatic transfers, automatic contributions, automatic rules. They remove the need for daily discipline. This matters more than you think. A recent survey showed that nearly 70% of Americans feel stressed when thinking about money. Automation removes stress by removing decisions. Here's the punchline: if you do not give your money a place to go, it will go everywhere. And here's the deeper truth: direction creates momentum, and momentum is what turns slow progress into long-term growth. The second principle is one that wealthy thinkers rely on constantly. Awareness creates control. Most households avoid looking closely at their finances because the truth feels uncomfortable. But wealthy people understand that clarity is a tool, not a threat. Picture your money as a map of a city. If the roads are blurry, you will get lost. If the map is clear, every route becomes manageable. Tracking spending is not about restriction, it is about visibility. A small discovery today prevents a large crisis tomorrow. According to national data, the average American spends more than $1,500 every year on unnoticed or forgotten subscriptions and impulse purchases. That number surprises most people, and it should, because here is the punchline. You do not need to earn more to be in control. You need to see more. And once you see the path clearly, you adjust it naturally. The third principle is about resisting lifestyle creep. This one challenges emotional habits. As income rises, spending rises. New job, new car. Raise at work, nicer apartment. Bonus, bigger vacation. It feels rewarding in the moment, but it erases long-term progress. Wealthy people treat lifestyle upgrades like stepping stones, not escalators. They slow the rise. They capture the gap between income and expenses and use it to build stability. A recent statistic shows that nearly half of Americans earning 6 figures live paycheck to paycheck. That number shocks people because it proves that income does not solve behavior. Here is another punchline. If your lifestyle rises as fast as your income, your stress will rise faster. And when your stress rises, your financial decisions worsen. This principle is not about deprivation, It is about pacing your lifestyle so your future has room to grow. The fourth principle is one that separates experienced thinkers from impulsive ones. Simplicity beats complexity. Most Americans feel overwhelmed not because money is complicated, but because their financial lives are cluttered. Too many accounts, too many subscriptions, too many goals, too many decisions. Wealthy people simplify. They reduce the noise. They set fewer priorities and commit deeply to them. Think about a cluttered kitchen. You cannot cook well when the counter is buried under tools you never use, but when the space is clean, every task becomes easier. The same is true with money. Studies show that people with fewer financial accounts and fewer tracking categories have higher savings rates. Here is the punchline. Complexity is the enemy of consistency, and consistency is where the real power of wealth hides. The fifth principle is emotional discipline. This one is difficult because it asks you to act against your instincts. When the market drops, fear rises. When friends brag about big gains, FOMO rises. When news headlines predict doom or promise growth, emotions pull you in both directions. But wealthy thinkers understand a pattern that repeats across decades. Emotional decisions destroy more wealth than economic downturns ever could. Think about driving in a storm. If you panic and jerk the steering wheel, you crash. If you stay steady, you pass through safely. During market volatility, Americans who stayed invested historically recovered far faster than those who sold in fear. In fact, missing just the best 10 market days in a decade can cut long-term returns almost in half. That is a statistic most people never hear. And here is the punchline. Your emotions are wired for survival, not strategy. If you do not protect your decisions from your impulses will guide your future. The sixth principle is patience with purpose. Wealth grows slowly, then suddenly. But most people never reach the sudden part because they quit too early. They switch strategies every few years. They chase trends, get frustrated, and abandon progress. But wealthy thinkers commit to a long game because they understand the math behind compounding. The first 10 years feel slow. The next 10 years accelerate. The years after that can feel life-changing. Imagine planting a tree. For years, it barely rises above the ground. Then one year, it doubles in height. That is how compounding works. According to historical averages, the American stock market has returned about 10% annually across a century. That pattern held through wars, recessions, inflation, and political cycles. The system works, but only for those who stay in it long enough. Here is the punchline. The biggest returns show up after the moment most people give up, and here is the clarity. If you stay consistent, time becomes your greatest ally instead of your greatest fear. The seventh principle ties everything together. Protect the downside so the upside can take care of itself. Wealthy thinkers are not obsessed with hitting home runs. They are obsessed with avoiding catastrophic mistakes. They limit fees, reduce unnecessary taxes, avoid high-risk speculation, keep emergency savings, and structure their financial lives so that no single event can destroy decades of progress. Think of it like building a house. The roof matters, but the foundation keeps everything standing. A recent study showed that the average American pays thousands of dollars more in unnecessary fees and interest every year. Those small leaks compound into massive losses over time. Here is the punchline. You do not need to be brilliant to build wealth. You just need to avoid the mistakes that break the average household. These principles are the scaffolding that support the 7 hidden rules, and once you internalize them, the entire landscape of money begins to feel different. But the emotional heart of this journey, the philosophy that truly shifts a person from survival mode to stability and eventually to autonomy, comes next. There comes a moment in every financial journey when the conversation shifts from numbers to something deeper. Money stops being about bills and budgets and starts being about meaning. Stay with me here, because this is the turning point most Americans never reach. Wealth is not really about accumulating dollars. It is about shaping a life where your time is your own, your mind is calm, and your decisions are guided by intention, rather than pressure. When people say they want to be wealthy, what they really want is space. Space to breathe, space to choose, space to live without fear of the next unexpected bill undoing everything. Think about how many Americans wake up every day feeling like they are running on someone else's schedule. Rent rises, groceries jump, interest rates climb, medical bills stack up, and soon it feels like the world is closing in. A recent report noted that nearly half of adults say financial stress hurts their sleep. That statistic is not about money. It is about the emotional weight money places on the human spirit. Wealthy thinkers understand something powerful. The goal is not to escape responsibility. The goal is to build enough margin that responsibility no longer crushes you. Money is not just a tool, it is a teacher. It teaches you patience, discipline, humility, and perspective. It exposes your fears. It exposes your habits. It exposes your stories about what is possible for your life. There is a reason why two people can earn the same income, yet live completely different emotional realities. One feels trapped. The other feels steady. The difference is not the number on the paycheck. The difference is the philosophy they carry every day. Pause for a moment and imagine this. Imagine a version of your life where your decisions are not shaped by panic, but by purpose. A life where money supports your values instead of dictating them. A life where you no longer chase the next exciting thing because you have built a foundation that grounds you. This is what wealthy people understand deeply. Wealth is simply the expression of consistent alignment between your behavior and your long-term values. Here comes a punchline that most people never realize. Wealth does not make you free, wisdom does. Money without wisdom leads to stress, confusion, and exhaustion. Wisdom without money leads to frustration. But the two together create autonomy. Autonomy is the real prize. The ability to say no, the ability to walk away from what drains you, the ability to pursue what matters. This is the version of wealth that lasts beyond market cycles and beyond income fluctuation. And here is the part that might surprise you. A wealthy philosophy is not built during good times. It is built during hard ones, when the market drops, when you feel uncertain, when life throws you something unexpected. These moments teach you who you are under pressure. They reveal whether you act from fear or from strategy. Wealthy thinkers step back during these moments and ask a different question. Not why is this happening to me, but what is this moment teaching me about my systems? That shift in perspective is one of the most powerful financial moves a person can make. Money amplifies whatever story you already believe. If you believe life is scarce, money will feel scarce. If you believe you are always behind, money will confirm that feeling. But if you believe your future is shaped by consistent effort, money becomes a partner instead of an enemy. And here comes another punchline. Wealth is not the finish line. It is a continuous practice, a practice of paying attention, adjusting patterns, building margin, and allowing time to work on your behalf. The real purpose of wealth is freedom, but not the flashy kind seen on television. It is the quiet kind, the freedom to slow down, the freedom to think clearly, the freedom to be present with people you love, the freedom to choose work that fulfills you instead of work that exhausts you. When you understand this, money stops being a source of fear and becomes a source of possibility. But everything we have explored so far leads to one final moment, a moment where you decide whether to continue this path or slip back into old patterns. And the invitation to take that next step begins in the final section. Welcome to Paige. I'm super excited. If you've stayed with me through every section, then you are already thinking about money differently from most people. You can feel it. Something in you knows that your future does not have to repeat your past. And if you want to keep building this clarity, this calm, and this long-term confidence, then take one small step today. Share one insight from this video in the comments so others can learn with you. I read every comment, and your perspective matters more than you think. And if you want more videos that help you build stability, direction, and financial strength in a world that constantly pulls you off track, subscribe to the channel. Our journey continues, and the next chapter starts with you.